Welcome. The year 2025 has resurrected the zombie genre like never before. From brutal Asian horror to Hollywood blockbusters and emotional survival dramas, the living and the dead once again rule the screen. Each of these 20 titles opens a different door to the apocalypse, from mystical experiments in Indonesia to ruined New York, war-torn laboratories, and frozen wastelands. This is not just a ranking. It's a journey through a world where hope fights decay, and humanity becomes the final line of defense. The Elixir. In a small Indonesian village, a family has been making traditional herbal concoctions for generations. Their life flows peacefully until the father of the family, ambitious and obsessed with immortality, develops a new potion. It is supposed to be a breakthrough, a cure for disease, and the key to eternal life. However, the experiment goes out of control. Instead of healing, it brings death, or rather, something worse. People begin to rise from the dead, turning into merciless, bloodthirsty creatures. The village descends into chaos, and the family that created the potion must now struggle to survive in the world it destroyed itself. This is a story about human pride, the limits of science, and desperation when life becomes a curse and hope turns into a nightmare. We bury the dead. After a mysterious military experiment, Tasmania turns into a death zone. Thousands of bodies lie unidentified, and the authorities send in special forces to clean up the area. Among them is Ava, a woman who joins the unit solely to find the body of her deceased husband, Mitch. As she ventures deeper into the zone, she discovers something terrifying. Some of the bodies are beginning to move, as if death were not the end. The line between life and resurrection is slowly blurring, and Ava must face the question of whether the man she loved is still himself. We Bury the Dead is an emotional thriller with elements of horror, combining an apocalyptic vision of the world with personal drama. The film explores how far one can go to avoid accepting loss. Zombie Apache. In the quiet Arizona desert, a group of workers discovers an old, forgotten warrior cemetery. When an excavator disturbs the ground, an ominous sound echoes from beneath, and a moment later, something that resembles a dead man's hand emerges. No one takes it seriously until night falls. Then phantoms begin to rise from the sand, armed with axes, undead warriors who will not rest until their peace is avenged. In the nearby town, people lock themselves in their homes, but Sheriff Hatfield and his daughter Jose must confront the horror head-on. Chaos spreads, the streets burn, and their only ally becomes a local outsider known as Liverpool Joe. As the ancient warriors launch a bloody war against the living, the town transforms into a battlefield where traditional zombies give way to terrifying wraiths from centuries past. The studio, Duhpocalypse. Hollywood is preparing the biggest film about the end of the world and the biggest disaster in cinema history. The studio. Duhpocalypse is a satire on the film industry in which the production of a zombie spectacle spirals out of control. Matt Remick, the new head of Continental Studios, tries to finish a blockbuster about the undead apocalypse, but soon discovers that the real horror is happening behind the scenes. The stars are acting like zombies, the script changes every hour, and investors are demanding more blood and less logic. Chaos erupts on set, explosions, fake corpses, and real conflicts. In this industry, even the end of the world has to look good in the trailer. The studio. Duhpocalypse is a brilliant comedy about how Hollywood turns its own zombie movies into reality. Only here, the monsters don't need makeup. Red Plague. The world has been destroyed by the Red Plague, a mysterious virus that killed most of humanity in a few weeks. Carter, a former soldier, has been hiding in the wilderness for months, away from people and his former life. He's still haunted by the memory of his wife and young daughter, who died in the first days of the epidemic. Every night is a nightmare. Every day is a struggle for survival and meaning. However, When a young girl appears at the door of his hideout begging for help, Carter is unable to push her away. He sees in her the shadow of a lost child. Together, they embark on a journey through a ruined world, full of silence, decaying cities, and the corpses of the past. Along the way, they discover that the greatest danger does not always lurk in the virus, but in people who have ceased to be people. Red Plague is a story of guilt, loss, and redemption, of a man who must learn to live again in a world where love is the last act of courage. Zombie Repellant. It all started like a fairy tale, an engagement, joint plans, and a trip to Las Vegas to get married. Liz and Chad were convinced that nothing could spoil their happiness. Until the car broke down in the middle of nowhere, and the only place they could look for help was a small, strangely quiet town. At first glance, an idyll. Smiling people, neat houses, peace and quiet. But something in the air smelled of death. In time, they discovered that for more than 100 years, this place has been hiding a terrifying secret. An experiment to stop a zombie epidemic went out of control, and its effects still circulate in the bodies of the residents. At night, those who should never be are awakened. Liz and Chad must escape before they become part of this sick story. Zombie Repellant is a combination of horror and black humor, a story about love that is put to the test in a world where even death doesn't end everything. Queens of the Dead. Welcome to Brooklyn, a place where every night is a show of power, daring, and glitter. Dre, a charismatic drag promoter, is preparing the grand opening of her new club. It's set to be a night full of dancing, lights, and color that will make history. But before the music rings out, something starts to go wrong. The electricity goes out, people scream, and something that shouldn't exist, hungry, crazed zombies, bursts in through the door. In a few moments, the party turns into a slaughterhouse. The drag queen and her friends have to put away the sequins and grab anything that can become a weapon. Now they are fighting not only for survival, but also to prove to the world that even the end of the world will not destroy their courage and style. Queens of the Dead is a wild mix of horror, humor, and queer energy in which makeup can be as dangerous as a zombie tooth. Zombies of the Third Reich. In the final days of World War II, an elite Allied unit is sent on a mission in occupied France. The goal: to infiltrate a secret Nazi bunker. Instead of the planned intelligence, they discover a laboratory full of gruesome experiments. The Nazis tried to create super soldiers through biological manipulation. The result? A horde of living corpses, terrifyingly strong, with an appetite for meat and a hatred of all life. The team, which entered as a spy squad, must now fight for survival and prevent the nightmare from escaping the bunker walls. In this fight, time and trust in comrades become as dangerous as the infection itself, and every step could be the last. Ziam. A mysterious epidemic breaks out in Thailand when a ship carrying illegal cargo arrives at the port. Instead of fish, the containers hide something much worse, a pathogen that turns people into wild, unstoppable zombies in minutes. In the midst of the chaos is Singh, a former Muay Thai champion, who learns that his beloved Rin, a doctor, is trapped in a hospital engulfed by the plague. Unable to leave her behind, he ventures into hell itself to save her. Fighting hordes of infected, Singh uses his hand-to-hand combat skills, turning every blow into a desperate act of survival. When all hope seems lost, the pair find a boy named Buddy, the only one who may know the source of the infection. From that moment on, it's no longer just about escape, but about stopping the epidemic before it spreads across the country. Lisik, origin point. Elisha had long carried anger inside her. After the death of a friend who couldn't stand school humiliation, her world fell apart. Then strange things began to happen in the school. Students became more and more aggressive, and their eyes began to glow with a blue light. It soon became clear that this was the result of a secret experiment called Lisik, led by teacher Dr. Espino. The project was supposed to improve humans, but created something much worse: creatures driven by pain and anger, The school turns into a battlefield, and Kara, Elisha's friend, tries to understand what really happened and how to stop it. As the virus spreads rapidly, one thing becomes clear. This is no ordinary infection, but the beginning of something that could engulf the entire world. Nazi zombies. In the woods in an old World War II cemetery, a group of young women perform a ritual that was supposed to be just an innocent experiment with magic. What they don't know, however, is that beneath the ground lie the remains of Third Reich soldiers, victims of secret experiments. When the spell is uttered, something awakens. The earth cracks and deformed, bloodthirsty bodies of Nazi soldiers emerge from the graves. These are no ordinary zombies. They are creatures created as a result of old Nazi research on immortality. The girls, who were only supposed to play with spells, must now fight for survival, trying to reverse what they themselves unleashed. Among the rubble, screams, and fire, they will understand one thing. Certain ghosts of history are better never to be awakened. Uncontained. Dan wakes up in the winter wilderness, amidst snow and a silence that seems to engulf the world. He remembers nothing, neither his name nor what happened before. When he gets up and wanders through the desolate forest, he discovers that civilization has collapsed. An epidemic that could not be stopped has turned people into feral creatures. He finds refuge in a lonely house among the trees, where siblings Jack and his younger sister Brooke live. Together, they try to survive, living in constant tension between silence and fear of what might come. Over time, Dan discovers that danger doesn't always have the face of a monster. When an armed militia appears nearby, the line between human survival instinct and cruelty begins to blur. In a world where everyone hides their secrets, one thing becomes certain. The virus is not the only thing out of control. Silent Zone. 10 years after the outbreak that turned people into savage, mindless creatures, young Abigail is still struggling to survive. She once had a family but lost it in the first days of the plague. Since then, she has been accompanied by Cassius, a former policeman who saved her life, although his own conscience has long been tainted with guilt. Together, they roam the desolate countryside, avoiding both the infected and the humans, who have become even more dangerous. When their hideout is destroyed, they set off towards a legendary refugee called the Silent Zone, a place where civilization is said to still exist. Along the way, they meet survivors, but trust in this world is a luxury that can cost lives. The closer they get to their destination, the clearer it becomes that the real danger is not in the monsters but in human nature. In Silent Zone, silence means one thing: something is approaching. Forgive us all. The world as we knew it no longer exists. After the outbreak of a mysterious epidemic, humanity has turned into something it can't control, creatures called howlers, driven by hunger and rage. Rory, a woman with a past, hides alone in a mountain cabin, far from anything resembling the old world. One day, Noah appears in her life, wounded, on the run from the brutal GMA military organization that controls what's left of civilization. At first, Rory doesn't trust anyone, but Noah claims to have something that can save the world, a sample of the cure for the infection. Their meeting becomes a turning point, from a quiet struggle for survival to a desperate escape through forests full of monsters and people more dangerous than they are. In a world where everyone carries guilt and forgiveness is only a word, the fight for life becomes a fight for the soul. The Walking Dead, Dead City Season 2. Manhattan after the apocalypse is a hell where survival comes at a price. Maggie is still searching for a way to save her son and regain what she has lost, but this time her greatest enemy may be the man she once trusted, Negan. In the second season of The Walking Dead, Dead City, the two are drawn into a conflict over control of the ruins of New York City. Negan comes under the influence of the Lady, a ruthless leader who sees him as a tool to build a new order. Maggie, on the other hand, must find Herschel and face the people for whom the city is the last bastion of power. Among the ruins, mutants, and betrayals, every move becomes a risk. As the past begins to catch up with the heroes, the line between guilt and redemption becomes increasingly blurred. In Dead City, silence never means peace. It's a harbinger of what's to come. The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon Season 3. Daryl and Carol return in the third season of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, which moves the action from France to a Europe in chaos. After escaping from a monastery and confronting pouvoir, Daryl tries to find his way home, but instead of peace, he ends up in England, a place where civilization has finally surrendered. In London, he meets Julian, a former scientist who claims to know a way to reverse the infection. Carol joins him, but their alliance is put to the test when they encounter new adversaries, a group of survivors called the Bone Nomads. After a storm destroys their ship, they find themselves on the Spanish coast, where something even more dangerous than the infected awaits them, people who take advantage of the chaos to create their own kingdoms. In a world where there are no more borders, Daryl must decide whether his home is the place he fled from or those he can still protect. Zomvivor. A mysterious epidemic breaks out in Thailand, turning people into zombies in no time. Chaos spreads throughout the city, and the few survivors seek shelter before the streets are completely plunged into darkness. At the center of events is a group of students who are trapped in their school, cut off from the world and on their own. Each day brings new dangers, and the line between friendship and survival begins to blur. Within the walls of the school, fear, suspicion, and a desperate fight for life are born. No one knows where the virus came from or if there is a way to stop it. The series Zomvivor, 2025, shows the apocalypse through the eyes of young people who, in the face of death, must learn the hardest lesson: how to remain human when the world around them is no longer human. Operation Undead. At the end of World War II, the Japanese army conducts a secret biological weapons experiment in Thailand. The weapon is supposed to turn the tide of war, but instead spirals out of control. A deadly virus begins to reanimate dead soldiers, turning them into creatures that are no longer fully human, neither dead nor alive. A squad of young Thai soldiers is sent to the scene of the disaster with the task of destroying the laboratory and stopping the spread of the infection. What was supposed to be a routine mission quickly turns into a fight for survival against the undead in uniform. In the darkness of the jungle, amid the ruins of war, the soldiers must face not only monsters, but also the consequences of human experimentation. Operation Undead is a Thai war horror film in which history meets horror and science becomes a weapon against humanity. Newtopia. Seoul descends into chaos when a mysterious virus begins turning people into zombies. In the midst of this apocalypse, fate brings together two former lovers, Jae-yoon, a soldier trapped with his unit on the roof of a skyscraper, and Young-ju, a girl who sets out against all odds to find him. Newtopia is a Korean series that combines horror with romance and black humor. In a world where death lurks around every corner, the characters discover that sometimes love can be more dangerous than the plague. While Jae-yoon fights for survival among his own kind, Young-ju travels through a city full of infected people, meeting those who have lost faith in any kind of tomorrow. Their paths cross in a place where the end of the world becomes the beginning of something new, not only for them but for all of humanity. 28 years later. 28 years after the first outbreak of the rage virus, the world is still a shadow of its former civilization. A handful of survivors live on a small Scottish island, among them Spike, a boy who knows only the echoes of the old world. His mother, Isla, begins to fall ill. The symptoms resemble the rage virus, but something about her is different, more human, more disturbing. When the island community considers her a threat, Spike decides to break the rules and set off for the mainland to find a way to save her. On the other side, he discovers that the virus has not disappeared. It has mutated, adapted, and still lives in humans. Among the ruins, he encounters a scientist who claims to have a cure, but his laboratory, called the Bone Temple, hides dark secrets. Spike fights against time monsters and his own fear, knowing that not only his mother's life is at stake, but also the future of all humanity. 28 years later is a story about love stronger than the apocalypse. It's been an incredible year for zombie fans. 21 productions proved that the apocalypse keeps evolving, becoming more emotional, realistic, and unpredictable. Which title impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The next ranking is coming soon.